Most people, when they find out their spouse has betrayed them, scream. They throw plates. They pack a bag and head to a motel while sobbing into a pillow. Me, I just sat at the kitchen island tracing the ink of my own name, a name I hadn't written. My husband, Mark, thinks he's a genius. He thinks he's the next big tech disruptor, the entrepreneur who just needs one more injection of cash to turn his string of spectacular failures into a billion-dollar empire. But as I stared at the HELOC application on our table, the one where he had meticulously forged my signature to tap into $200,000 of our home's equity, I realized he wasn't a genius. He was a predator. And he was trying to eat the only thing I had left to my name. 10 years. That's how long I've spent building this life. While Mark was networking at expensive bars and pivoting his business model every 6 months, I was the one working 50-hour weeks as a senior auditor. I was the one who skipped vacations to make extra principal payments. I was the one who turned this suburban house into a fortress of financial security. And Mark, he viewed my hard work as his personal safety net. To him, our home wasn't a shelter, it was a casino chip. "Hey, baby, did the mail come yet?" Mark's voice drifted in from the garage, upbeat and whistling. He walked into the kitchen, smelling like expensive cologne and desperation. He didn't even look at the papers in my hand. He was too busy checking his reflection in the microwave door. "Not yet," I said, my voice as flat as the paper I was holding. I tucked the forged document under a stack of grocery coupons. "Well, keep an eye out," he said, flashing that smile that used to make me melt but now just made my skin crawl. "Big things are happening, Quinn. The investors are finally seeing the vision. We're about to be private jet wealthy, I promise." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was wearing a $300 shirt bought with money we didn't have, talking about a business that didn't exist, while standing in a kitchen he was trying to steal from me. "Mark," I asked softly, "what happens if this vision doesn't pan out? What happens to the house?" He laughed, a short, dismissive sound that told me exactly where I stood in his hierarchy of importance. "Don't be so suburban, Quinn. You have to risk it to win it. Besides, as co-owner, I have a right to use the assets to grow our future. It's practically my money anyway." There it was, the entitlement. The belief that because he shared my bed, he was entitled to harvest my sweat and blood. He didn't know I had already seen the final notice hidden in his gym bag. He didn't know I knew about the 3 private loans he'd taken out from guys who don't use banks, guys who expect to be paid back with interest or skin. He thought he was forging a signature. He didn't realize he was signing a confession. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't even let my hand shake. Instead, I waited for him to leave for his strategy meeting at the golf course. As soon as his tires cleared the driveway, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved under dry cleaners. "Hello, Sarah, this is Quinn. I need a partition action and I need it yesterday. My husband just handed me the rope. I need you to help me tie the knot." The secret to a successful audit isn't finding the mistake. It's letting the person making the mistake believe they're getting away with it. For the next 72 hours, I was a ghost in my own home. While Mark was busy at his strategy meetings, which I now knew were just hours spent at a high-stakes poker table downtown, I was deconstructing his life. I waited until I heard his heavy, rhythmic snoring before I crept into his home office. It was a room filled with success, posters, and empty scotch bottles. To anyone else, it looked like the workspace of a busy man. To me, it looked like a crime scene. I didn't start with his computer. Mark thinks he's tech-savvy, so his laptop was encrypted with a password I didn't have. But Mark is also arrogant. He believes I'm just a suburban wife who doesn't understand the big leagues. Because of that, he was sloppy with his physical trail. I found the first thread in the lining of an old leather briefcase. A stack of private loan agreements. These weren't from Chase or Wells Fargo. These were from private equity groups with names like Apex Recovery and Summit Holdings, shorthand for high-interest sharks who lend to people the banks won't touch. As I scanned the numbers, my stomach did a slow, nauseating flip. Mark hadn't just forged my name for a HELOC. He had used our home as implied collateral for over $300,000 in personal business debt. He'd lied about our combined income, lied about his liquid assets, and worst of all, he'd checked the box stating I was a silent consenting partner in his ventures. He wasn't just gambling with the roof over my head. He was building a gallows and putting my neck in the noose. The next morning, I sat across from him at breakfast. He was scrolling through his phone, looking annoyed. "Everything okay, Mark?" I asked, sipping my coffee. I made sure my hand didn't shake. "Just waiting for the bank to clear the processing stage," he grumbled, not looking up. "They're being bureaucratic. Honestly, Quinn, this is why this country is failing. They don't support the visionaries." "I'm sure it'll clear soon," I said softly. "You've always been so bold with your choices." He finally looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "That's right. And once this hits, I'm buying that Porsche we talked about. You deserve a thank you gift for being so patient." The thank you gift was the house equity he'd stolen. The patience was him waiting for me to lose everything. What he didn't know was that while he was dreaming of Porsches, I was sending high-resolution scans of his forged documents to my attorney, Sarah. "Quinn," Sarah had told me over a secure line an hour earlier, "this is a gift. Because he forged your name on a federal loan application, he's committed a felony. But more importantly, because he defaulted on those private loans before trying to tap the house, we can argue intent to defraud. We're going to file for a partition action immediately." A partition action is a legal nuclear option. It's a way to force the hand of a co-owner. But we weren't just forcing a sale, we were filing a motion for unequal distribution. The logic was simple. I provided 100% of the down payment, 100% of the mortgage payments for the last 3 years, and 100% of the maintenance. Mark provided 100% of the fraud. "The goal," Sarah explained, "is to sever his interest in the property before his creditors can attach their liens to it. We're going to make him a legal stranger to this house." I looked at Mark as he scraped the last of his eggs off the plate. He looked so confident, so entitled. He thought he was the hunter. He had no idea that I had already shifted the bait. "I have to go into the office early today," I said, standing up. "Big audit coming up. Go get 'em, Tiger," he said, blowing me a kiss. "I'll have dinner ready when the millions hit the account." I walked out the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The millions weren't coming. But the sharks he'd been lying to, they were getting impatient. And I was about to give them his new address. The most dangerous weapon in a divorce isn't a private investigator or a hidden camera. It's a quitclaim deed and a partition action filed with surgical precision. By Wednesday, the bank's fraud department had already flagged the HELOC application. They didn't call Mark, they called me. Because I had preemptively filed a notice of forgery and an affidavit of identity theft with the local police, the bank wasn't looking at us as a couple in trouble. They were looking at him as a criminal. "Quinn, if we move now," my attorney Sarah whispered over the phone, "we can force his hand. He's drowning in those private debts. If we offer him a way out that looks like a lifeline, he'll sign anything." The plan was a partition by sale action, but with a twist. I was going to sue my own husband for the right to buy him out of the house for pennies on the dollar, using his own secret debts as the leverage. That evening, Mark was pacing the living room, his face pale. The investors were clearly calling. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked, looking up from my laptop. "You look tense." "It's just the markets, Quinn, you wouldn't understand," he snapped, his voice cracking. "The bank is taking forever with the HELOC. I might need to borrow some of your personal savings just for 48 hours. The audacity. He had already tried to steal my house, and now he was eyeballing my retirement account. "Actually, Mark," I said, closing my laptop slowly, "I know about the HELOC and I know about Apex Recovery." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air out of the room. Mark froze. His eyes darted toward the door, then back to me. "Quinn, I can explain." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice dropping to a cold, professional whisper. "I'm an auditor, Mark. I don't need explanations. I have receipts. I know you forged my name. I know you're 3 months behind on payments to people who don't care about visions. And I know that by tomorrow morning, they're going to file a lien against this house. Mark collapsed into the armchair, his entrepreneur persona evaporating. I was going to pay it back, I swear. I just needed the bridge loan to clear. Here's what's going to happen, I said, sliding a folder across the coffee table. This is a quitclaim deed. You are going to sign over your entire interest in this property to me. In exchange, I will pay off the most immediate $50,000 debt you owe to those private lenders today. It'll keep them off your back for a month. He looked at the paper like it was a death warrant. If I sign this, I have nothing. I've put 10 years into this life too. No, I countered. If you don't sign this, the bank will prosecute you for the forged HELOC. You'll go to prison, the house will be foreclosed, and you'll still owe the sharks every cent. If you sign, you stay out of jail and you get 30 days of breathing room. I watched his mind work. He was looking for the angle, the pivot. He thought if he signed the house over, he could still live here, still use me, and eventually win it back once his next scam took off. He thought he was giving up a piece of paper to save his skin. He didn't realize that Sarah had already filed a lease pendens, a legal notice that the property's title was in dispute. This meant that the moment he signed that deed, the house was locked in my name only, shielding it from any future judgments against his social security number. Fine, he spat, grabbing a pen. I'll sign. But you're being incredibly cold, Quinn. We're supposed to be a team. We were a team, Mark, I said, watching him scratch his name onto the document. But you decided to play for the other side. As he handed me the paper, he actually looked relieved. He thought he'd dodged a bullet. He thought he'd traded a house he couldn't afford for a debt he could run away from. He had no idea that I hadn't just saved the house. I had just isolated him. By signing that deed, he had legally detached himself from the only asset he had. He was now a man with zero equity and 100% of the liability for his business failures. I'm going to go get some air, he said, trying to regain some of his swagger. I need to call my partners, we're moving to phase 2. Good luck with that, Mark, I said. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I called the process server. He's on his way to the club, I told him. He's wearing a blue blazer. Serve him the notice to vacate and the lawsuit for fraudulent inducement in front of everyone. The beauty of a financial trap is that it doesn't look like a trap until you try to move. The next afternoon, Mark was at his favorite high-end lounge downtown. He'd invited 3 of his business associates, men he owed a combined 6 figures, to celebrate his new liquidity. He'd spent the morning checking his bank app, waiting for the HELOC funds to hit. He didn't know that the bank had already canceled the application based on my fraud report. He didn't know that the $50,000 I promised to pay his creditors was actually held in an escrow account, contingent on him vacating the property within 24 hours. I was sitting in my car across the street, watching through the glass windows of the lounge. I wanted to see the moment the visionary finally ran out of road. Mark was mid-laugh, gesturing wildly with a glass of expensive bourbon in his hand, when a man in a nondescript gray suit walked up to his table. Mark Thompson? The man asked. Mark didn't even look up. Not now, buddy, we're in the middle of a closing. You've been served, the man said loudly, dropping a thick stack of legal papers right into Mark's appetizer plate. The table went silent. Mark's partners leaned in, their eyes narrowing. These were men who didn't like being associated with legal drama. What is this? Mark stammered, his face turning a shade of gray that matched the server's suit. It's a notice to vacate, a restraining order for financial elder abuse, and a civil suit for forgery, the server said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. You have until 6 p.m. tonight to remove your personal belongings from the property. After that, you'll be trespassing. One of Mark's creditors, a man with a very expensive watch and a very short temper, grabbed the papers. He scanned the top page, the one where Quinn's attorney had clearly outlined that Mark no longer held any legal interest in the house. Mark, the creditor said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. You told us the house equity was the collateral for our bridge loan. This paper says you don't own the house. It says you signed it over to your wife yesterday. No. "It's a misunderstanding," Mark yelled, standing up so fast his chair flipped over. "Quinn, it's just a legal maneuver, it's for tax purposes." But the sharks weren't listening. They realized the $300,000 in implied collateral they'd been banking on had vanished into thin air. Because Quinn had secured the quitclaim before their liens were filed, the house was a fortress they couldn't touch. Mark was now just a man with a forged signature and a mountain of personal debt. I watched from the car as Mark was escorted out of the lounge, not by the sharks, but by the manager. He stood on the sidewalk, looking around wildly, realizing he had no home to go to, no car, it was a lease in my company's name, and no friends left at that table. When I got home, the locksmith was already there. By 5:55 p.m., the locks were changed. By 6:05 p.m., Mark's designer suits and empty scotch bottles were sitting in neat black trash bags on the curb. When his Uber pulled up, he didn't even try to shout. He looked at the house I had saved, the house he had tried to steal, and he looked at me through the window. I didn't wave. I didn't scowl. I just took a sip of my tea and turned back to my laptop. I had the deed. I had the equity. And because of the way Sarah structured the fraudulent inducement suit, every penny of the debt he'd incurred was pinned to his social security number like a lead weight. He had gambled with my life, so I made sure he lost his own. As I watched the Uber pull away, I realized the house had never felt so quiet, or so safe. Mark thought he was a player in a high-stakes game. He forgot that in any game, the house always wins, and in this house, I'm the one who keeps the books.